Welcome to the Living Legends. My name is Edmund Mudibo. This edition is the second part of my one-on-one conversation with Professor Julia Ojiambo. The first part of the conversation was on her early life, education, and life in academia, where she was the first person to receive a PhD from the University of Nairobi's College of Health Sciences. The second part is about her life in public service. We start the conversation with her election as the Member of Parliament of Samia in 1974.
Just like I have implied, I think public health really exposes one to the public. And if one is interested, like I was interested, beyond just knowledge, I was also interested in human life. I was doing it so that I could cure kwashiorkor. And what attracted me most was when you fed a child with kwashiorkor, you saw life come back. You cured. So that opened a lot of space. For me, then I realized I needed to go back to the public. And amazingly, even at that time, the community also wanted, they had seen a little bit of what I was doing, and they had heard about their daughter who is doing something good out there and not for them, because malnutrition was also in my own community, and more importantly, the girls in my community were not educated. Leave alone the fact that there were not very many girls educated in Kenya, but you know, being who I was, from where I came from, having moved on to London, to Harvard, and I've come back and acquired a PhD when there were very few people around here with those kind of qualifications. My community also said, you come and give us that knowledge. And it wasn't difficult for me to say yes, because I had been interacting with the communities most of the time as I moved up as with my education career, and I was quite comfortable. Now I found an entry point to where I want the knowledge to go, because at the community level they didn't know about public health nutrition, and yet they were the ones devastated by malnutrition. I was touched with all this knowledge that I had quickly acquired, because my parents had given me that opportunity. Other girls probably had not gotten it. So when I was asked to go back and be one of the leaders in my own community, I quickly said yes. But more importantly, my family said yes. And my husband said, you can go. So I thought I would try it. And I offered myself. That's how I became a politician in 1974.
And how different then, because you stayed in politics for a while, how different was the politics of that time to the politics of the 2000s in terms of the evolution of the politics? And of course then added responsibilities, because it was not just your community that saw, requested, and you accept the call, but even serving in cabinet.
It was a different political dispensation, like what you see in that 2000 politics today. It was politics of men at that time. Leave alone asking what it was like. We didn't have the constitution. We had the British constitution, although it was our constitution. It was not quite, you know, Kenyans had to reject it and introduce our own constitution that had given us a lot of freedom. So for a girl, for a woman, for a mother, if everything else aside, it was not easy. Coupled with that, this nation was under one party system. So everybody who wanted to be elected went on one manifesto. So we all went. And you know, like we have said, there were few women, maybe nobody else in that region. In Western Province, I was the only woman who offered to join politics. So you can imagine the tradition, the fact that other women are not supporting you because they don't know what you're doing, that the men are saying, no, we don't want a woman in the field with us. But it was very interesting. I managed to tackle it and win on first shot. On that, I was appointed assistant minister. And I became the first one, because nobody else had acquired that level of leadership in this country. It was a win for the women, and it was a win for the nation. So I became the first woman in Western Province to be elected to Parliament, but more importantly, here I became the first woman to join the cabinet as an assistant minister. And it was a challenge, but I had prepared myself adequately for it. I was not prepared for government because I didn't know what it would mean like being in government, but I was equally challenged, and I was prepared for that. My training had exposed me to policy issues, and that we covered quite a lot of that in public health. But management of state affairs is a different thing. And when I became assistant minister, I was opened to a lot of challenges. I was given a lot of portfolios. I was in charge of youth, I was in charge of women, I was in charge of libraries, I was in charge of archives, I was in charge of housing and settlements, touch it, welfare of families. It all came under that one portfolio of a woman. So I sat back and applied my knowledge, but also we had very good civil service, and they were able to assist me to develop policies in all those areas. And upon those policies, you can see Kenya is different today. Yes. So those of us who were there first had a problem setting those policies in place, but they have been improved upon, advanced, and Kenya has reached where we are. Yes. Very advanced nation.
Mm-hmm. And just going through what you've been involved in, you had a passion for the Girl Guide movement. What is it that you saw that you wanted to impact and still engage in the Girl Guide movement?
A Girl Guide movement was part and parcel of my upbringing. From home, mentioned that my parents were missionaries, and from church, we were taught service to the people. So when I went to Butere, the first thing I did was also to seek to join community service. And so I joined Girl Guide movement as a brownie. So by the time I came to Alliance, I was already growing up into girl guiding. At Alliance, I improved on as we grew, we became Girl Guides. Joined to that, I also picked up Red Cross and St. John Ambulance. They teach almost the same skills of first aid, service the people, offering a service to the vulnerable. And so that became an area that was of specific interest, particular interest to me as I grew up. And girl guiding therefore became part and parcel of me. And I was particularly interested in their motto, be prepared, all the time. And I carried my little torch, I carried my little box with little medicines and bandages, and whenever we were at school or traveling on the road, I'll be very conscious of what can I do to help. So Girl Guide has been part of me. I grew up, therefore, from tenderfoot to girl brownie to scouting to what it takes to be a Girl Guide. I went through the ranks to first class Girl Guide, to a scout. I became a national chair of the Girl Guide movement, a national chair of the Girl Guide and Girl Scout movement in Kenya, while I was also an assistant minister. So that's where you see me in schools, inspecting guard of honor, and also in Girl Guiding uniform. So Girl Guiding was particular interest to me. Even today, I still associate.
Now, the Center for Advancement of Women and Children is one institution you formed. What's the success story behind this initiative?
The Center for Advancement of Women came out of the 1985 conference. I don't know whether people can still remember, but you know, that's the conference that took this country by surprise, when the women of the world congregated in Nairobi, and the men of Nairobi decided to clear and leave this city just to the women. It was all flowers, as they, so to speak, as they called it. But it was a very important happening globally. It was a United Nations World Conference that brought the world women together to discuss about the participation of women in development initially, which started in with the Mexico conference. Then we went to Copenhagen and came to Nairobi. While at Copenhagen, the African region group, women delegations got together and said, we went to Mexico, and the first world ganged up. They saw us as primitive and educated and civilized. They thought we live on trees. But we come from very advanced traditions as well. We want to show the women of the world that where we come from are also rich nations. So we got together and drafted a resolution and presented it to the World Conference at Copenhagen, and to seek approval by the conference to allow the women of the world to come to Nairobi. The questions were, does Nairobi have facilities to host 6,000, 7,000 women? Of course we said yes. We have KICC, we have some Norfolk Hotel, we have Hilton Hotel, and what don't we have? We'll take you to our villages, we'll take you to our houses. And we did, indeed. So we had that conference here. But during that conference, what was important is that the women deliberated a lot on the future of the women participation in management of their nations, and issues that affect human life, health, water, economic growth of their nations, and so forth, and education of their children. So end of the conference, a resolution was made, a report was written, a declaration was adopted, and the report of the conference was dubbed Forward-Looking Strategies for Advancement of Women. So the women of the world, each delegation went back with that report. We also remained with the report as Kenyan women who had hosted the conference. I had been a deputy leader with that delegation when the conference came to Nairobi, and while it was here, my head of delegation, who was then Her Excellency Margaret Kenyatta, was appointed the president of the conference. So I took over the leadership of the delegation, of the government delegation. It was therefore upon me to assist the Kenyan women after the conference, to interpret that report into our own action plans, and also prepare for the next UN conference. Therefore, it was important that we set up the
Center for Advancement of Women and Children.
Center for Advancement of Women and Children, and to just for that purpose, to interpret the United Nations Resolution on Women and to get the Kenya women to participate in its implementation and to prepare them for the next stage, which was now the Beijing conference.
And indeed, and now we look at your current engagement in terms of the National Fund for the Disabled, because that keeps you engaged.
I was again deputy leader of a delegation to Copenhagen. But in '79, I had been an assistant minister for 5 years and had been running rehabilitation centers for people with disability. This time, apart from running the women conference, I had an interest also in advancing space for our people with disabilities in Kenya. So while at Copenhagen, I had left here with a mandate to also approach the government of Denmark to assist us in advancing our institutions, and more important, in training of teachers with the skills to teach our young people at primary and secondary school education. We didn't have a training center for them, so we came back. I went to the Danish government, I went to the parliament, and we sought their assistance, and they did indeed agree to come to assist us in Kenya, and that's how we started the Kenya Institute of Special Education as part of the Ministry of Education. Today, this nation is way ahead in training teachers to handle people with disability of all types, because the training is under one roof. They go there, they train for hearing impairment, mental impairment, physical impairment, visual impairment, mention it. So in 1980, alongside that, now we had achieved the institute for training. The people with disability in the villages didn't have the same and would not have access. So they needed service close to them. It still remained a problem because the government didn't have funds to reach them. Although we had funds to run rehabilitation centers, and that's all we could do. So it was important that we do Harambee, and that time in history, Harambee was the mode of fundraising for this nation. So we put together from the Ministry of Social Services a committee to fundraise, and we did a lot of campaign around it. But when the day was nearing, we realized we were not going to be able to raise very much, because even Kenyans were not quite impressed by a Harambee for people with disability. So we had to plead with the head of state, and we got President Moi to accept to be our chief guest. So when he came, we got strength, and he mobilized the whole nation. And a big Harambee was staged at Uhuru Park. During that time, a Harambee that yielded 20 million shillings was enormous Harambee. And indeed, it was a big congregation at Uhuru Park. After that Harambee, President Moi set up the National Fund for Disabled of Kenya and appointed a board of trustees. I was one of them, and I'm still on the board up to today. So the board of trustees has translated that activity into a big national activity. And we go now to all the villages around Kenya. Through the administration, assistant chiefs, through the political leadership, we are at sub-county level, county level, regional level, and we cover literally every sub-county of Kenya once a year. We go around offering mobility aid, tools of trade to individuals, assisting schools to manage little projects, improve space for children with disability, and also now even offer classrooms, buildings, dining rooms, dormitories, and we have done this around the country. In every county you find National Fund for Disabled.
And indeed, you know, when one just listens to you and partake of your life story, as it were, we're impressed in how you've managed to keep yourself still strong and active. Any closing words to the people of Kenya as you finalize?
Well, we need to keep health. I think I want to keep people of Kenya, that's very important, that we are able to supply ingredients that make us live strong and healthy, and that's food. And food production is very complex. So we have to agree to utilize every opportunity we have to till our land, to produce our food. Because out of food, health comes. We in nutrition sciences always tell people that what you are is what you eat.
What you eat is what you are.
What you eat is what you are. Yeah. So you have to eat. Mm-hmm. And what you eat is what you produce. You can't wait for somebody else to give it to you. Mm-hmm. So we want to continue to produce good food, available supply of food all the time to our people, properly prepared food, and then we can manage our health. We can utilize medical knowledge to cure diseases. But for good health, nobody gives it to you. A physician will not give it to you. You have to do it yourself.
And it has been a pleasure speaking to Honorable Professor Julia Ojiambo on her life in academia and politics. She is a trailblazer in public health and established the Kenya National Institute of Dietitians. She has seen the change of Kenya's political landscape for the last 50 years. We thank Honorable Professor Julia Ojiambo for giving us her time today. My name is Edmund Mudibo. Thank you for watching.